All right, so are you ready to dive deep into business leadership and strategy?
I am.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So you've sent over all these excerpts from this book
Oh,
about
no.
how top leaders think and operate.
Yeah.
And I think our mission today is to figure out
Right.
what are those key insights that can help us understand
Yeah.
what makes for really effective leadership,
Okay.
especially when it comes to things like navigating change
Mm.
and building a team that can just knock it out of the park.
It's a lot.
It is.
Yeah.
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 But one of the first things that kind of jumped out at me in this book
Yeah.
was this whole concept of intuitive management,
Oh, yeah.
or they shorten it to IM.
Interesting.
And it's almost like, it sounds a little bit like a sixth sense,
Yeah.
almost like a superpower for leaders
Right.
to be able to anticipate and shape the future.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is fascinating.
The book dives into some really interesting concepts.
It really does.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It is interesting.
so when you read this,
Yeah.
what comes to mind for you when you see this?
Well, it's not just some like mystical ability.
Right.
It really aligns with a concept
Okay.
that is actually pretty practical, which is strategic foresight.
Oh, okay.
And that's something that's essential in modern business leadership.
Right.
It's the ability to not just react to what's happening now,
Right.
but to think about what could happen down the line and prepare for it.
So it's not like you're trying to predict the future with a crystal ball or anything.
Not necessarily.
But it's about developing this keen sense of what's coming over the horizon.
That's it.
Okay.
Being proactive rather than reactive.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, the book gives a pretty stark example
Yeah.
of what happens when a leader doesn't engage in this deep thinking. And they tell the story of Jim, who was an auto parts executive.
Yeah, Jim's story
Yeah.
is a real wake-up call. He was so focused on the day-to-day of keeping his business running
Right.
that he failed to see what was happening with General Motors, which was his main customer.
Right.
And that lack of foresight cost him.
Yeah.
He missed so many opportunities to adapt,
Yeah.
to diversify, even to expand into new markets.
Yeah, and that's got a sting.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, how much time do you actually dedicate to thinking deeply about these things
Right.
that could shape your own industry?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Are you actively seeking out information and perspectives
Yeah.
that might challenge some of those
Right.
assumptions that you hold?
Yeah,
Because you might be wrong.
we might be. It's a good question for all of us.
It is.
To ask ourselves,
Right.
we can get stuck
Yeah.
in the day-to-day and lose sight of the
Absolutely.
bigger picture.
Yeah. So how do we cultivate this?
Right.
This.
Well, it's about being intentional. Maybe set aside time each week
Okay.
to reflect on trends
Right,
that
yeah.
are happening.
Yeah.
Actively seek out
Uh-huh.
viewpoints that you don't agree with.
That's good.
Even experiment with scenario planning.
Okay.
Like, what if this happens?
Okay.
What if that happens?
Yeah.
How would we respond?
Okay. So it's kind of like a mental workout
Yeah, that's good.
for leaders.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That actually leads perfectly
Yeah.
into another key insight that I pulled from the book,
Okay.
which is this idea of connecting the dots and going on the offensive.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's about being proactive
Right.
and spotting those opportunities
Mhm.
that others might miss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the book really drives home
It does.
this importance of recognizing these patterns and trends
Yeah.
early on.
And it's not just passively observing
Right.
what's
Start-
happening.
Right.
You have to take that information
Okay.
and connect the dots
Gotcha.
and uncover those hidden opportunities.
Yeah. And they give a great example of this.
Yeah.
The creation of the minivan.
The minivan classic.
It wasn't just about crunching the numbers.
Right.
It was about understanding a fundamental shift
Mm.
that was happening
Yeah.
in American lifestyles
Yeah.
and recognizing that need that
Yeah.
wasn't being met.
Exactly.
It's interesting how Sperlich kind of went with his gut on that one,
He did.
even when the data wasn't totally there.
It wasn't all there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you think about trusting your intuition?
Well, that's where the deep thinking comes in.
Okay.
You're not just pulling ideas out of thin air.
Right.
You're grounding your intuition in a solid understanding
Yeah.
of the market, the customer,
Yeah.
the trends that
Yeah.
are shaping the world.
Yeah.
And you're connecting the dots
Right.
in a way that reveals those hidden opportunities.
So I guess our listeners should be asking himself,
Yeah.
what trends are emerging in my field? Are there any seemingly unrelated dots
Right.
that I can connect
Exactly.
to reveal
Yeah.
a hidden opportunity?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes innovation lies at the intersection
It does.
of those ideas.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
All right, so let's shift gears a bit
Okay.
and talk about something the book calls operating mechanisms.
Interesting.
They describe it as the structures and processes
Okay.
that drive effective
Mm-hmm.
decision-making and execution.
Yeah, think of them as the systems
Okay.
and routines
Mm-hmm.
that keep an organization running
Right.
smoothly and efficiently.
So we're talking about meetings,
We are.
processes for making decisions,
Mm-hmm.
allocating resources,
Yep, all of it.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The book highlights this CEO named Joyce,
Mm-hmm.
who used these things called future forums
Future forums. Interesting.
to communicate her strategy
Okay.
and build buy-in
Yeah,
from her leadership team.
that's a great idea.
And from what I read, these forums weren't just
Yeah.
top-down pronouncements.
Yeah.
It was about creating an environment where her
Oh.
team felt
Comfortable.
comfortable
Yeah.
speaking their minds,
Yeah.
asking tough questions,
Mm-hmm.
and challenging assumptions.
Yeah, that's interesting. What's interesting is that these forums were designed for dialogue.
Right.
She didn't want to just dictate her strategy.
Right.
She wanted to get buy-in from her team.
Yeah.
And that's crucial
It is crucial.
for effective leadership.
It is.
Yeah.
But what about that balance
Okay.
between structure and flexibility?
That's a good question.
Because the book mentions Bob Nardelli
Oh, yeah.
and his approach at Home Depot.
Very structured.
Very structured.
Yeah.
With those Monday morning phone calls.
Yeah, infamous.
Infamous.
Monday morning phone calls.
Yeah, and that 8-day
8-day.
strategic planning session.
That's a long time.
It is a long time.
Yeah.
And while it might have been effective for alignment,
Right.
could it stifle creativity and innovation?
That's a great question.
And how do you find that balance?
Well, it's not about being rigid for the sake of being rigid.
Right.
It's about having clear processes
Okay.
that everyone understands
Boy.
and follows, but allowing for flexibility within those processes.
Okay.
It's about empowering people to make decisions,
Right.
to take ownership,
Yeah.
while still maintaining a sense of alignment.
Alignment and
That's-
accountability.
Yeah.
So it's not either.
No.
It's finding the right mix
It is.
for your company culture.
It is, and it's an ongoing process,
Yeah.
of evaluation and adjustment.
Right.
What works for one organization might not work for another.
Right.
What works at one point in time might need to change
Yeah.
as the organization evolves.
Right.
So the key is to be constantly evaluating
Okay.
the effectiveness of your operating mechanisms.
And asking yourself.
Asking, are they serving their intended purpose?
Right.
Or are they fostering the right behaviors?
Yeah.
Are they helping you achieve your goals?
Yeah.
If not,
Right.
it's time to revisit them.
It's time to revisit them.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that.
Oh, good.
So, thinking about structure and these systems
Right.
makes me think about something else from the book.
Yeah.
This power of dialogue
Mm-hmm.
to shape behavior within an organization.
Absolutely.
It's not just about giving orders, is it?
That's not, no.
It's about creating a culture
Right.
where people feel empowered
Right.
to speak up,
Yeah.
to challenge the status quo,
Mhm.
to contribute their best ideas.
The book really emphasizes that.
It does.
You need to create a culture of psychological safety.
Okay, what is that?
That's where people feel safe
Right.
to share their thoughts and their ideas.
Yeah.
Even if they're unpopular.
Even if they're different.
Even if they're different.
Yeah.
Without fear of being shut down. It's about fostering trust
Okay.
and respect.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
They tell a story in the book
Yeah.
about this CEO, Harry,
Uh-huh.
who transformed this really toxic culture of fear and silence.
That's great.
The quarterly operating reviews,
Right?
which should have been these opportunities
Should have been, yeah.
to have these open and honest discussions,
Right.
became these tense exercises
It did.
in blame and self-preservation.
So he wanted to shake things up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did he do?
Well, it's a great example of how a leader can intentionally
Okay.
shift the culture.
Okay.
Harry realized these reviews were hindering their progress.
Right.
He wanted to encourage candor
Okay.
and constructive feedback.
Gotcha.
He wanted people to speak their minds.
Even if it meant
Even if it meant challenging the status quo.
challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
So he didn't just tell people to be more open.
Right.
He actually changed the structure.
He did. He changed the format
of the meetings.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. He created a format that encouraged dialogue and collaboration.
So it's like what we were just talking about with Joyce and her future forums.
Exactly.
It's not enough to just say,
Right.
let's have a conversation.
You have to create the environment.
You have to create the right environment.
And the structure to support it.
And the structure.
Yeah.
It makes you think about your own communication style.
It does.
Do you encourage open dialogue?
Right.
Do you create a space where people feel safe to share their ideas?
Yeah, a culture of open communication is a really powerful asset for any leader.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of leadership,
Okay.
let's dive into one of the most crucial aspects.
Right.
Judging and developing other leaders.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the book challenges some of those traditional notions,
Members of
talent management.
Right.
It argues we need to move beyond
We do.
those generic competency models.
Mm-hmm. Those boxes.
Yeah. And look deeper.
People are complex.
Right.
They have unique strengths,
Mm-hmm.
motivations, and potential.
That might not always hit in those boxes.
Exactly.
There's a story in the book about this CEO, Tim, who regretted not giving a promising young leader, Joe, more opportunities to shine.
Interesting.
So it seems like Tim recognized
He did.
Joe's talent,
Yeah.
but he didn't take that next step
Right.
to nurture it.
Right. And that's a common pitfall.
It is the common pitfall.
For leaders,
Yeah.
you get so caught up in the day-to-day.
In the day-to-day.
You miss those chances to invest in the development of others.
It's a loss for everyone.
It is.
The individual, the team.
The organization.
The organization.
Yeah. You have to think about the people you work with.
Right.
Do you understand their strengths?
Yeah.
Are you creating opportunities for them to grow?
So identifying the potential is one thing.
It is.
But actively nurturing it.
It's another.
It's another.
Yeah.
Now, the book features some really impressive examples of leaders who excelled at this, including Jack Welch at GE.
Oh, yeah.
He was legendary for his
Yeah.
ability to spot talent.
Yeah, and then create opportunities.
And create opportunities.
There's one to grow.
Right.
Yeah.
So he understood that people don't grow in a vacuum.
They don't.
You have to give them the space
You do.
to experiment, to make mistakes, to learn.
He was known for moving people around
Really?
to different functions and industries,
Oh, wow.
giving them a breadth of experience
That's great.
that prepared them
Wow.
for leadership roles.
So it wasn't just sink or swim.
It wasn't.
He had systems in place.
He did to
Right.
support their development.
Right.
He provided coaching mentorship
Mm-hmm.
and those rigorous talent reviews
Okay.
where senior leaders
Yes.
would present their assessments
Of
with high potential employees.
high potential employees.
Yeah, it was a very systematic
Wow.
and intentional approach to talent development.
It makes you think about how we judge and develop
It does.
the future leaders around us.
Yeah.
You know,
It does.
do we actively look for their strengths?
Yeah.
Do we create those opportunities for them to grow?
Those are good questions.
It is.
Yeah. Ask.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we've talked about building this strong social system,
Right.
but how do we actually put it into practice?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Because it's one thing to understand the concept,
Right.
but another to actually create the culture
Right.
within an organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
What advice would you give?
Well, it's not a one-size-fits-all
Okay.
approach.
Okay.
You have to design a social system
Mm-hmm.
that aligns with your goals, your values,
Mm.
the nature of your work.
Where do we even begin?
Well, the first step is
Yeah.
to understand your current social system.
Okay, so
Take a step back.
we got to figure out what's already there.
What's there? How do people interact?
How do people interact?
What are the channels of communication?
Okay.
What are the mechanisms that drive decision-making?
Yeah. Are they even working?
Are they working?
Are they helping or are they hurting?
Are they serving the goals of the organization?
Yeah.
Are they fostering collaboration?
Yeah.
Open communication?
Are they creating silos?
Are they creating silos?
Yeah.
Hindering progress?
We've got to be willing to challenge the status quo and maybe even redesign some of these systems
Absolutely.
that aren't working.
If you want to create a social system that supports your strategy
Right.
and empowers people,
Right.
you have to be willing to do that.
It's not always easy.
It's not, especially in organizations that are resistant to change.
Resistant to change.
Yeah. But it's essential.
And this is an ongoing process.
It is.
Wow.
Right? As the organization grows and evolves,
Mm-hmm.
that social system needs to adapt.
Yeah, you got to be intentional. You do. About designing it and willing to experiment.
Experiment, make adjustments.
No magic formula.
There's no magic formula.
It's about constantly evaluating,
Yeah.
adapting, refining.
That's it.
Now, as you're talking about this,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this story the book shares about Paul Sharon
Oh, yeah.
and his transformation of Liz Claiborne.
That's a great example.
It seems like a perfect example
It is.
of how a leader can intentionally shape the social system
Right.
to meet those strategic goals.
Exactly.
So when Sharon took over, Liz Claiborne was
Struggling.
struggling to keep up
With the time.
with the time.
Yeah, they were known for their namesake brand.
Right.
But they needed to broaden their portfolio,
Yeah.
appeal to a wider range of customers.
So he went on this spree of acquisitions.
He brought in new brands
Right.
that complemented their existing offerings.
He knew that just buying new brands wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough.
He had to create that social system
Right.
to support the growth,
Yeah. And foster innovation.
foster innovation
Yeah.
across the entire portfolio.
Across the portfolio.
Now, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Sharon didn't come from a fashion background.
Right?
He understood business strategy.
But he recognized that he needed to create a culture
Yeah.
that embraced creativity and collaboration.
And that's what he did.
That is what he did.
The company's culture was
Too hierarchical,
too
hierarchical.
too siloed.
too siloed.
Yeah.
Designers, marketers, merchants.
All operating in their own separate worlds.
It makes sense to a degree,
It does.
especially in fashion.
Right.
You know, you want to give people space
Right.
to be creative.
Yeah, but it was hindering their ability to adapt and innovate.
Right. They weren't leveraging that collective intelligence of
Yeah.
the organization.
So how did he change that?
Well, he introduced a series of operating mechanisms
Okay.
designed to foster dialogue and collaboration.
Okay, and one of the most impactful...
With the weekly intelligence meeting.
What were those meetings all about?
Well, they were designed to bring people together
Okay.
from different departments
Yeah.
and give them a platform
Okay.
to share their insights about trends, customer preferences.
So it was a way to break down those silos.
Yeah, encourage cross-pollination.
Cross-pollination.
It wasn't about making decisions in those meetings.
Okay.
It was about expanding everyone's thinking,
Got
sparking those aha moments.
getting people to think beyond
It's
their roles and responsibilities.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Sharon was very intentional
He was.
about how he structured these meetings.
He wanted to create a space
Yeah.
where people felt comfortable sharing their ideas.
That psychological safety
It's crucial.
is so crucial.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about creativity.
If people are afraid to speak up,
Yeah.
you're shutting down that creative energy.
The impact was remarkable.
It was.
People started seeing the value in working together,
They did.
sharing their ideas,
Yeah.
understanding that bigger picture,
Right.
how their individual roles
Yeah.
contributed to the overall success.
They got it.
Yeah,
And that shift in mindset had a ripple effect.
that's what we want.
That's what you want.
Leadership isn't just about,
Setting a strategy.
you have to create the condition
Create the right condition.
for that strategy to succeed.
Right.
You have to build the right social system.
So it's all about understanding human behavior,
It is.
fostering a culture of trust and transparency,
You got it.
collaboration.
That's it.
It's been a fascinating deep dive
It has.
into leadership and strategy.
It has been.
We covered so much
A lot.
from intuitive management, operating mechanisms,
Yeah.
power of dialogue,
Yeah.
building a strong social system.
It's all connected.
It is all connected.
Yeah.
So what's the one big takeaway?
Well, if there's one thing to remember,
Yeah.
it's that leadership is about people.
It's about creating the right environment for them to thrive,
Just thrive.
to contribute their best ideas,
Yeah.
work together,
Mhm.
achieve extraordinary things.
I love that.
Yeah.
Leadership is a social system.
A social system.
It takes the focus away from the individual,
It does.
puts it on that collective
The
effort.
collective and
Let's
collaborative.
celebrate that shared purpose.
That's where the magic happens.
That's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Now, as we wrap up,
Yeah.
I keep thinking about something you mentioned,
Okay.
that these principles aren't just for the workplace.
You're not.
They can be applied
To every aspect of our lives.
to our families, our communities, our personal growth.
Think about the operating mechanisms in your own life.
Oh, wow.
Your daily routine, your work habits,
Mm-hmm.
the way you interact with your loved ones.
Yeah.
Are those systems serving you well?
Are they helping you achieve your goals?
Are they helping you live a more fulfilling life?
What a great question for all of us to ponder.
We're all leaders in some capacity,
That's right.
whether it's at work, at home, in our communities.
Yeah, and by applying these principles.
We can create more positive
Yeah,
and impactful social systems
I love that.
in all areas of our lives.
Such a powerful message to end on.
It is.
So to our listener, keep exploring, keep learning.
Keep diving deep.
Until next time, keep diving deep.